The bizarre flirtation between the elite French intellectuals and pedophilia in the second half of the 20th century is one of those stories that falls into the box stranger than fiction. Speaking about sex with minors in a radio interview in 1978, Michel Foucault said that assuming that a child is incapable of explaining what happened and was incapable of giving his consent are two abuses that are intolerable, quite unacceptable. The controversy usually concentrates on a petition that was published in France's foremost paper, Le Monde, in 1977, which argued the rights of 12 and 13-year-olds to have relations with whomever they choose. The petition was signed by many prominent names: Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, Roland Barthes, Gilles Deleuze, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Simone de Beauvoir, as well as a number of future French ministers.
Stopping it there. Okay, so I stumbled upon this video and I saw the title, which is basically like how French postmodernism kind of pushed this idea of pedoism. You know what I mean? Can't really say the full word because of YouTube censorship. And I've heard Dr. Jordan Peterson talk about this quite a bit. He's very critical of a lot of postmodernism ideas because I think they may have some good things, some good philosophical beliefs and ideas, but sometimes these beliefs and ideas just stay in conversation when it comes to just thought and not actually pushed out into the world. Because a lot of people who are a part of this postmodernism bourgeoisie community, they are detached from actual reality. They're detached from the everyday normal life that the citizens have to go through. So their beliefs or their conspiracies or their theories or their philosophies don't really resonate when it comes to transferring over to real life, right? And that a lot of their ideas just become degenerate, and it's this sort of this whole like overcorrection, because I feel like postmodernism has sort of been birthed from the rejection of the church and the rejection of religion and rejection of sort of this moralistic ideas that is rooted in religion. And because at some point the church and religion was oppressing the citizens and was sort of stifling people's lives and people's upward mobilities or people's abilities just to be themselves and live freely, kind of like a libertarian idea. And again, it's sort of like anything that's sort of rooted in tradition, that might be rooted in conservatism and religious beliefs, is sort of kind of looked down upon, and is they go like the complete opposite direction where they go too far. And so I just thought that this video would be interesting. I'm not really sure who this person is, so I'm not saying I agree with everything they say and who they are as a human being. I just stumbled upon their YouTube channel and I thought this was really interesting. I'll put their name on the screen. But anyway, we're gonna get more into the video.
In the wake of 1968, the era of active politics had begun. Petitions and protests were the engine of this activity. There were hundreds and hundreds of petitions signed and distributed in the coming decade. These petitions attacked the moralistic and ossified establishment on all fronts, one of which was of course sexual. There was a dramatic shift in sexual mores in the 1960s. 1968 had been preceded by 1967's Summer of Love. There was an atmosphere of sexual freedom and a more general rebellion in lifestyle after 1968. And it was against the backdrop of this sexual revolution that the pro-pedophilia lobby enters into the story. Muriel Salmona, a psychiatrist and president of the Traumatic Memory and Victimology Association, has said that after 1968, attitudes towards pedophilia began to shift among the intellectual elite. Children were viewed as having the right to be considered sexual beings. In Salmona's words, pedophilia was considered a sexual orientation. It was all part of a vision of freedom. In the wake of the 1968 protests and the sexual revolution of the 60s, the defenders of pedophilia began to gain a lot of traction.
I mean, stopping it there, I'm not surprised by any of this because, of course, a lot of this stuff, like the gender stuff, the sexuality stuff, the gender fluidity stuff, introducing young children into things like drag shows, which is adult entertainment, and taking them to drag clubs, giving them sex ed books that are basically pornographic, talking to first, second, third graders about sexuality and gender expression and if they can change their gender and their genitals. in very much blurring that boundary that most civilizations have clearly held, that there is a difference between children and adults, and those relationships should be held accordingly, so where that matches our values and our principles and our morals and stuff like that. A lot of that stuff is birthed from universities, from the postmodernism sort of niche areas of universities, and kind of again from the elites, the bourgeoisies have pushed it into everyday life where it's just not appropriate. The thoughts period aren't appropriate. The belief system isn't appropriate. I understand wanting to just sort of meddle in the conversation to, as a philosopher, to, you know, comb through your thoughts and ideas, but again, just like fantasies and stuff like that, some things are to be kept in conversation and never released into reality. And that's why you see a lot of people who are pushing these ideas come from the universities. I'm not saying that pedo or the idea of that is stuck in elite circles, but the only people that are pushing these belief systems come from these university elites, bourgeoisie, postmodernism eras. You know what I mean? So I'm not really surprised at all. That's why you see it a lot in Hollywood. That's why you see it in a lot of creative spaces, because those two worlds are very, very closely linked. Anyway, let's continue.
At this time, pro-pedophilia activists formed associations such as the Pedophile Liberation Front and the Research Group for a Different Childhood, and they began publishing their own journals, such as Backside and The Little Rogue. As one sociologist, Jean-Hugues Deschaux, has commented, opponents of paedophilia were accused of being reactionary, and paedophiles were redefined not as guilty of sexual abuse, but as victims, like homosexuals, of a retrograde legislation. Deschaux is referencing here the French law at the time, which treated homosexuality as a moral crime punishable by law. The pro-paedophilia lobby framed the issue as a matter of oppression of children. The notion of child protection was deemed patriarchal and denounced as a danger to the child's personal integrity.
Oh my god, that makes total sense, because everything is framed as so many things that the rest of us push against when it comes to the far left ideology, they always come back as, that's patriarchal, that's misogyny, that's oppression. That's always their pushback. And I like when he said that people who pushed against this was seen as reactionary. It's the same type of people, it's the same thing when people push against this sort of grooming behavior that's been going on in the rainbow community, as you're just being transphobic, you're just being homophobic, you're just being a right-wing conspiracy theorist. It's the same thing of saying like, oh, you're just being reactionary. This is really nothing to worry about. It's the same sort of system. It's the same sort of rules that they're using, but just different language. Anyway, let's continue.
Child's personal integrity. Thus, for the French intellectuals of the era, this was a matter of questioning the state's authority, of questioning whether the state was overreaching by exercising its authority to protect minors from sexual abuse. Any attempt to understand how the elite intellectual class of France could come to believe in pedophilia must start here. 1968 was a powder keg. It may not have culminated in the literal rolling of heads as 1789 had, but it was an explosion of revolutionary energy just the same. The educated youth were brimming with the energy of transformation. This energy exploded in the protests and riots of 1968, but it continued strong into the 1970s and 80s. Looking at the world around them, the world of capitalism and consumerism, a world of elitist and unjust institutions, all of which was brought into sharp focus by the Vietnam War. Seeing this world, the students and intellectuals believed that an alternative must be found. This was the age of liberation. The civil rights movement in America had raised hopes of a freer and better world, while also highlighting how rigid and broken it was, and how words like freedom and equality were laced with unspoken terms and conditions. In the space of a decade, the civil rights movement fought for the rights of African Americans, the feminist movement fought for the rights of women, and the LGBT movement fought for recognition with the Stonewall riots, which are still commemorated every year with pride marches. There was the sexual revolution that challenged the societal mores around sexuality, and there were the anti-war protests against Vietnam. Across the world, the old moralizing order was being challenged. There was a frustration and anger at the state of the world, and an earnest and often naive desire among the youth to make a better world.
So basically what people have done is they've taken a real concern for oppression, the unequal treatment of African Americans. Why am I saying African American? Black people, women, and stuff like that. They used that, and that was a true need. That was a real thing that needed to change. There were laws that were unequal to people. There were systems in society that were unequal. There were women and that felt like they were smothered and that they couldn't pursue the life that they wanted. There were things that truly needed to change, but there were people that had other agendas that used that, and they sort of snuck in there and sort of rode that wave of change and revolution. And like he said, the naivete of youth, not realizing that they're going to be predators and they're going to be people in these groups that have other agendas that are going to use your want of change and manipulate that and pervert that into something else. You see that today. I mean, I guess every young generation is this, but I guess looking at the Gen Z, you can see that they have such a strong will to, break down whatever social systems or society that's already in place. They have a strong will of change and movement in revolution or evolution, but they're doing it as if we're still living in the 1950s, and we're not. But they've been sort of brainwashed into thinking it is really that bad, and therefore you need to rip down an entire system to rebuild it to something else. You see it again within the rainbow community, LGBTQ+, this gender spectrum and trans and all these things, of not realizing that because they're naive and because they're idealistic and because they have a lack of lived experiences, that people are going to use the true sense of, I just want to find my way and I don't want to be like what my parents tell me to be, and I want to be able to be free. Use that true sense of something and manipulate that and pervert that into something else, to the point of there's no girl that's really a girl and there's no boy that's really a boy, and trying to sort of manipulate the boundaries between child and adult. And yeah, it's really that simple. This is what cult leaders do. Anyway, let's continue.
Article for the French left-wing newspaper Libération, journalist Serge Cholandon captured the spirit of the post-1968 era perfectly. Laboratory, the moral order, that is the enemy. And Libération at that time is nothing but the particular echo of the common vertigo. We are at the end of the 1970s. The traces of the May of the barricades linger on the walls and in our heads. Forbidden to forbid, let's challenge all forms of authority. It was more than a period, it was a laboratory. It gave birth to hopes, dreams, senseless fights. The ban, any ban, is felt to belong to the old world, to the world of the bitter, the oppressors, the employers' militias, the bludgeoning police, the corrupt. Thought is in confusion. In this tumult, this reversal of senses, this anchoring of new reference points, in this new understanding of morality and law, this fragility and urgency, everything that stands in the way of all freedoms is to be torn down. Everything was challenged. Nothing that had been handed down from the old order could be taken for granted. And in instinctively challenging every element of the status quo, it was eventually discovered that perhaps some boundaries were better left in place. Like, for example, the belief that children can consent to sex. This is the context in which the petition of 1977 has to be read.
Thank you. Some boundaries are there for a reason, and that's a lot of what this generation, the younger generation, and every generation that have preceded that have always wanted to rip down the establishment, change the boundaries, change the rules, and make it their own, I guess, because every young generation just thinks they're better than the last and smarter than the last. So whatever boundaries or rules or foundations you created is stupid, and we know better, right? And not realizing, like, yes, the boundary between adult and child is there for a reason. Not every rule, not every established social agreement needs to be ripped down. There's nothing wrong with talking about it and analyzing it, but it doesn't need to be destroyed. It's this whole throw out the baby with the bathwater thing. The conservatives and the rights do that as much as the liberals. You know what I mean? Like, the conservatives want all the women to get pushed back into the kitchen barefoot and pregnant and have no woman have the freedom to make their own decisions of what they want in life. But then the left think that no women should have children and get married because that's a part of the patriarchy and internalize and then and internalized misogyny. You know what I mean? Like, everybody kind of does it because everybody's trying to overcorrect. But some things are there for a reason, and not everything needs to be destroyed or dismantled. Anyway, let's continue.
French intellectuals were not allied with the establishment, but were in solidarity against it. They were at the cutting edge of the revolution in social values. In hindsight, this is the best and only case that can be made in the defense of these great thinkers. They were engaged in hundreds of various causes. They were signing new petitions every other day for one cause or another. To isolate the pedophilia petition from the rest of the zeitgeist of that era is to commit a historical injustice. With that being said, a good rule of thumb for humans in all places everywhere might be, to paraphrase Mark Twain, if you find yourself on the side of pedophilia, it's time to pause and reflect. That's everything for this episode of The Living Philosophy.
There you go, guys, The Living Philosophy. I think if you find your side of pedos, I don't know, jump off a bridge? Better for society? Maybe? Just thinking, just saying. And I agree what he's saying. Like I said in the beginning, it's not like everything that's a part of postmodernism or philosophy or intellectual circles in university is wrong and bad. Again, I'm not saying throw out the baby with the bathwater, but you have to discuss, like you said, you can't dissect it, you can't turn it out. What we learned with the What is a Woman documentary, when we had, what is it, something Money, James Money, and the Kinsey person, that their belief systems is what birth gender roles and gender ideologies and all these gender studies in universities, to ignore the fact that these two men were raging pedos and child abusers. It's an injustice to the students that they're teaching these things to. These students should be aware of what these things are rooted in and what it came from, so they can look at their teachings with a grain of salt, you know what I mean? Anyway, guys, I thought that was really interesting. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell to get notifications when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to support this channel further, you can donate. My PayPal and Cash App link is in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, and subscribe. Another great way to support this channel is either join my brand new membership program, different levels, different tiers, different perks, or you can visit my brand new merch shop. Links down below and links to all of the alternate platforms I'm on, my socials, including my Twitter, all the ways to support me, and other ways to contact me for business is always in the links down below. I also have a second travel vlog channel. I travel as a lifestyle. I live abroad. If you'd like to know where I am in the world, you can go to the description box below. Also in the comment section, hit the link, go subscribe to my travel vlog channel and or follow me on my travel Instagram. My stories is usually what's most up to date. And I also have my other channel, Mika Reacts and Reviews. You guys have an amazing day. Bye.